Hello, this is Kelly Kleinman, and you are listening to the DealershipNews.com podcast, where we spotlight the who's happening in the automotive industry. It's foot soldiers, visionaries, salesmen, GMs, owners, service managers, and industry vendors alike. Somebody get me some oxygen. Our guest today is one of the digital marketing forces behind Brooklyn's Car King, Rudy L. Patron Tremenio of Brooklyn Mitsubishi, as well as Yonkers Kia, Security Dodge, and many others. Today's discussion is going to go in a different direction than most that we have on this podcast. It's a sensitive subject, but it's a very real factor to consider, as your car dealership is likely to face an increase in cultural, political, age, and gender diversity unlike ever before as we move into the next decade. Here to discuss his take on this issue is Digisphere Marketing's own Devin Rouff. Devin, great to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me, Kelly. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I'm really glad to have you on board and glad you joined us. I love asking each of our guests how they got into the automotive industry. Was it something you've always loved, or did the door of opportunity just open for you at a car dealership and there you were?
Well, great question. Actually, obviously, I do love cars. What's not to love about them, especially fast ones. And but what really started off my career is I was always in sales. I've been, told by my mom and many others that I was always blessed with the gift of gab. So always been in sales my whole entire life. I was 16, 17 years old selling shoes and had a real knack for it. Coming out of high school, I started to do mortgages because we all knew that the market was booming back then, around 2000, and unfortunately that market took a turn for the worse and crashed, and then had to look elsewhere for employment. It wasn't working out anymore. So had the owner of our company, Devin Rouff, and who's also my cousin, was already in car sales and dabbling in internet sales, and at that time that was something that most dealers didn't even have a clue of what that was. So gave me an opportunity to get in with the Atlantic Auto Group, which is a $1.1 billion auto group based out of Long Island, New York. And I really owe a lot to my opportunity, my experience there, because they were a group that really focused in on training, extensive training, and learned a lot from my years there. So that's really where it all started. Just came up through the ranks, did everything from selling cars, destiny deals, hiring, training BDC departments, implementing and creating digital strategies for some of the top selling dealerships in the country.
Well, before we get into our subject, I want to hear a 30-second Digisphere marketing elevator pitch as if you were trapped on the 20th floor of the Dealership News building in downtown New York with the owner of another large dealership group. So you've got 30 seconds. Fire away.
So Digisphere Marketing is a boutique digital marketing agency. We specialize in everything digital, but our core product lineup is mobile responsive websites, search engine optimization, pay-per-click advertising, social media marketing, and reputation management. So as I said before, we do everything that's under the digital umbrella, but those are our core products. And part of the reason why we are talking today is because we have seen a need in the industry for a focus on multicultural marketing. So while most dealerships are implementing strategies across the board for English, we notice that they're not really doing so for other languages. And in the country that we live in right now, there's a big need for that type of strategy. So that's really what we bring to the table. We focus on driving quality traffic that converts to your business and or website.
Well, you come from a very ethnically diverse market. You yourself are an interesting mix of cultures, being part Polish and Puerto Rican. What do you call yourself, a Puerto Rican? Isn't that what you, I think
yeah,
that's what you
actually,
told me.
that was a term that my aunt coined and trademarked, but yeah, it's kind of stuck. And most people laugh when I tell them.
Well, tell us about Brooklyn and its overall ethnic makeup so we get an understanding of the elements at play. I know that you work with El Patron over there in Brooklyn, and since he's one of your clients, let's it's a melting pot. So if you could kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what that ethnic makeup looks like, it'll give us sort of a good base to continue the interview with.
Sure, sure. And, we definitely work with Brooklyn Mitsubishi. We help them with their cultural marketing as well as their English marketing. But, not just Brooklyn, but just New York as a whole is truly a melting pot. There's so many different great websites out there that can give you the data on your particular area. And what you'll typically find is that there is a very, very, very large population of Spanish-speaking individuals. Now, that's not to say that there isn't also, very large Asian communities that are around here that you should be taking a look at. Italian, even Russian. So there's so many different opportunities there that I feel, or we feel, that are a lot of dealers are kind of missing the boat on. But for sure, Spanish definitely needs to be your second priority aside from English.
Well, how would you approach cultural diversity within the scope of a marketing campaign that you would manage?
Great question. So really what we do, and whether it be English or Spanish, we always have to think of Google first. Google really does run the internet. Anybody who is going to take a look at a product or service, one in two people will do a Google search on that product or service. So we really, really focus in on Google's algorithm and what it takes to make sure that your website comes up on the first page of Google for when people are searching for those relative keywords or geolocations. So with that said, if you take a look at your overall marketing strategy in English, you pretty much need to double that in whatever language you want to target. So, for instance, if I see that Spanish is the culture that I want to start targeting, then I have to make sure that I'm not relying on a English website with Google Translate built into it. When you choose to translate the website into Spanish, it actually gives you the dialect that comes from Spain. And if you are a New Yorker or from this area, you'll know that that's not the typical dialect of Spanish that's spoken here. We have a lot of, as I'm Puerto Rican, there's a lot of Dominicans, Mexicans, Venezuelans. I mean, there's so many different dialects that are spoken here. We want to make sure that we're catering to the right dialect for that market. So research into and knowing your PMA is crucial, and making sure that you're actually translating all of the content that's on your website for that particular dialect. You have to make sure that your keywords that you're targeting on Google are also written in that dialect, because that's how they are going to search. So if you're not targeting the correct keyword phrases, you will not come up correctly. Now, what most dealers are under the impression that they have Google Translate on their website, that's sufficient, and it actually isn't. So if you have your device set to Spanish, for instance, Google can tell the language setting of your device. And if your website is in English and I am searching in Spanish, your website actually won't come up on Google searches. The only way it would come up is if I was actually searching for the dealership name itself. So if I'm looking for used cars near me, your website won't come up unless it's in Spanish, unless it's in that language. So if you want to be able to capitalize on that traffic, you have to make sure that you're marketing separately in that language. So Spanish website, Spanish search engine optimization, focusing on those particular keywords and locations, Spanish ads across Google, Bing, Yahoo, as well as social media marketing. And I can't tell you how many times I've had dealers that say, I'm interested in pursuing marketing for this culture, but I don't want to build a whole nother website. Well, why are we going to serve Spanish ads and then land them onto a website that's all in English? That person won't be able to read through the content or know how to navigate the website. So it doesn't really make sense. So we have to make sure that we know our market, know the type of dialects that we need to market to, and then implement a strategy accordingly.
Well, see, that's interesting because, you're bringing up the advertising aspect of it. It's going to be in Spanish, so land on a website that is Spanish as well, particular to that dialect. Same with walking into the dealership. You've been around a long time. When dealerships in your area hire personnel, do they generally hire personnel to reflect the cultural makeup of the area? Or is that not as important as finding someone who can simply show up on time, sell or fix a car, work the deal desk, and hopefully stick around for a while?
Well, I think we can all agree that those are all qualities of an employee that we all want, right? We want to make sure that they're going to show up on time, they're punctual, that they're going to do their job. But it's equally as important to know your market, know your PMA, and you obviously can't market to a particular culture if you don't have the staff to accommodate that traffic once they come in. Not to mention, it definitely helps because some individuals might feel more comfortable working with somebody who speaks their same language. There's a trust factor there. So it's definitely important to know your cultural makeup of your area and to staff accordingly. But without a doubt, they should have those particular features in as far as their resume is concerned.
Well, what happens to the concept of a fair next up rotation system if dealers decided to match walk-ins and other leads with sales personnel that actually match the ethnicity of that potential customer? I mean, it makes sense, but does it open a door to potential HR issues in your experience?
I don't really think so. As far as my experience, the dealerships I worked in, it wasn't always a fair rotation system. It was, if you're doing the right thing, you're going to get your opportunities. So as far as, matching up the ethnicity of a potential customer with an employee, I mean, Kelly, we all have the opportunity to learn another language, right?
Sure.
If I wanted to start learning how to accommodate particular culture in that area, I could take courses. I could learn. I can be included in that rotation. So I believe it's just a matter of making sure that our customers feel at home and trust our staff and our dealership to do business with us.
So other than learning the other language, which I still think is great, even if you could greet somebody in their own foreign tongue, which is perhaps alien to you, but certainly not foreign to them. What are some of the other options that to kind of as a workaround? Could it be, this is something that I was thinking about, could it be to fashion dynamic ads that appeal to specific affinity groups with call to actions, let's say, that include the appropriate contact at the dealership? For example, if you do a Korean language ad with the contact being a Korean salesperson, or maybe a Jewish-oriented ad being funneled to a Jewish salesperson, is that a way to work around? And have you ever done anything like that?
Sure. I mean, we always want to make sure that we have the right call to actions in our marketing ads, but I would usually recommend funneling the traffic, or the phone number. You can either have a particular tracking number that goes to a specific line for that language. You can have a prompt when you call into the dealership. Press 2 for Spanish. Obviously, it's in Spanish, but and then it would get to the appropriate salesperson or BDC rep to field that call. It's definitely important because if we're marketing a particular language, it all needs to work together. We got to make sure that they have the opportunity to speak to that person on the line. When they come into the dealership, we make sure that we have the right personnel to accommodate them when they get there. As far as putting somebody's actual name on there, I mean, that's really at the discretion of the dealer and the employees. I don't know if that's really going to necessarily make or break your ads or the successfulness of the campaign. But definitely making sure that you have the correct staff and systems in place to accommodate that traffic, for sure.
Huh. See, I'm thinking that might be an approach to a dealership where you have sort of a cultural optimization package that includes putting in the steps that you just mentioned. It's sort of sparked my interest. I think it's kind of a cool idea, actually. outline some, we're talking about training here. Real quickly, I've got one question that deals with it. And I wonder if you could outline some of the issues that you see when dealer leadership doesn't have, do we call it cultural sensitivity training in play, and how they could prevent bad seeds from poisoning the workplace with unwelcome opinions, attitude, and biases. And by that, I mean, there's always people out there who would prefer not to serve certain people because they don't believe that that person's a buyer or they're cheap, or that there are issues like that. I've actually experienced that before. How would you approach that? And do you think there is a niche out there for something like a cultural optimization or cultural sensitivity training strictly for car dealers that maybe has gone unnoticed?
I would agree, definitely. So I've been in this business a long time, and I don't think I've ever heard of a dealership implementing any kind of cultural sensitivity training programs or of the sort. But I would definitely see how it could be useful. We're kind of in an industry where I think most of our focuses are more on marketing than training, and that's why I say I'm so grateful to have gotten my start in an auto group that does focus on training. And I think it's really important. And these days we are definitely in a market or in a world where we do have to be sensitive to those types of issues. So I think it will generally fall to your leadership, right, to make sure that they are aware of the employees that they have on their staff. Who are their aces and who are the ones that are maybe sensitive to certain subjects, and making sure that those are the people that are facilitating or working with this particular market that's going to start coming into your dealership once you start implementing these marketing strategies. So for sure, I think it definitely missed. And thanks for bringing it up, because maybe we'll start looking into implementing that.
You and I should have a conversation. Maybe it would be the basis for a speaking engagement that we could do together at some of these trade shows, because I think both of us have done enough research on it where it could be fairly pertinent. Maybe we could call it cultural conversion optimization. Just a thought.
Agreed. I'm in.
Lots of syllables in that one. Okay, this one's going to be our last question. It's very esoteric, but I like throwing President Reagan in there whenever I can. He once suggested that the only way to keep Earthlings from squabbling over petty differences was to unite against a common enemy. In his example, it was an alien force, and I think he used it 3 or 4 times until the intelligence forces said, "Will you quit mentioning aliens? We don't want anyone to know that they exist." Aside from that, what could that cultural, gender, political, age difference unifying force be? Could it be team sales incentives, monthly bonuses, awards, promotions? Bring a team together instead of it's the older guy against the young guy and it's that Italian guy. And we've got this diverse sales team. We've got these diverse service advisors. How do we bring them together so we unify against one force or for one cause?
Well, I think that still falls down to leadership, right, and how we run our teams. We definitely, those are great examples, sales incentives, bonuses, even awards or promotions. I think also the point that you brought up before about making sure that you have a fair environment. You don't want people thinking that there's any kind of bias, favoritism in there. But if it's done correctly and management is putting a focus on making sure that they have a staff that is working together and happy, it'll ultimately, be a successful business. I think a lot of times we don't put a focus on, our staff. And I am a firm believer that our staff is one of the most effective tools that we have at our disposal. So making sure that we have a happy staff and that works together is definitely a formula for success.
I'm thinking we're going to call it the Cultural Diversity Award, the Dealership News Cultural Diversity Award. Does that make sense? How do you like that?
I love it.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for joining us today, folks. Devin Rouff, Digisphere Marketing. Devin, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you again so much for having us, and look forward to speaking with you a little bit more about those speaking engagements, Kelly.
It sounds like a great idea. Folks, you've been listening to the DealershipNews.com podcast. I'm Kelly Kleiman, and we bring this to you several times a week. Stay tuned for the next one. Meanwhile, It's hump day. Have a happy one.